Ladies,
All right, we're live.
we are live. Hi, everybody.
Hey, hello.
Hi.
We're excited. We're here today with Shannon, and we're going to have a really amazing chat about art. And Shannon, why don't you kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll pose the question that will be our jumping off point.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me, Lisa and Lauren. I was so pleased to be connected to you by our mutual friend Todd, because we three and beyond really believe that art is for everyone.
Mhm.
And, you know, we are better people when we are creating and when we found a creative practice. And so I, like you both, through Art is Moving, Creative Flow helps people tap into their creative muscle, to find greater confidence in their creative process, to practice thinking differently, to be in a container for risk-taking and imagination and productive play in a way that's transferable to our personal lives and our professional lives. And I think, you know, what's really resonated with me in talking with you both is that we all really feel like it's not only good for our own selves to be creative, but the ripple effect into the way that it impacts the greater world is what's, you know, really my passion and important. So beautiful. I'm so happy to have found you both.
Oh, I know.
We're on the same mission, I think. You know?
And it's exciting when you do find a person on the same path, because you're just like, hey, there's somebody else here on this road. So
yeah, it's you know, it's just I really feel like it's my charge to bring creativity to the world, and to see others like Art is Moving, you know, be so connected to creative flow. It's like, okay, so I'm not the only one out here in the work.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well said.
Yeah, so we were thinking specifically about, because a lot of the work that you do is in the corporate realm, or let's say someone who works in an office building, and you had mentioned to us in a previous conversation that you would love to do that, to sort of bring art making into that world. And so today's question is, how can art play a positive role in a workday? Like, what might that do if someone did take that 5 or 10 minute break to make art? What do you think would happen, Shannon?
Well, you know, I think we can speak empirically because we've experienced what art making can do, but we also know that everybody appreciates research, right? And we've talked about this juicy research out of Drexel that says that if you make art for 45 minutes, even if you don't consider yourself an artist, even if, you know, you're not intending to make gallery worthy, museum ready art, it lowers your cortisol levels, it lowers your stress. And they found that out through swabbing people's cheeks, and, you know, people who consider themselves artists, people who don't. So I think just from the sheer experience of sitting down and finding a mindful moment, getting acutely focused on something that is tactile and kinesthetic. It's kind of like taking a shower or going for a run, or stepping away from something and having a different perspective. Not only does it like lower our stress and helps us like reframe and find calm, but I think it also yields new ideas. And so we've also seen through research that it upticks productivity. You know, like I know for myself, I get into this space and I'm like, I can't take a break. You know, I need to keep going. What if the ideas leave, or there's no time, we've got this like deadline that we're reaching for. But actually, like, I think if we take a break in a productive way, in an intentional space, it can really accelerate what we're doing, you know? And so I think for me, those are my chief interests, and what I would like to develop more in terms of research too, is seeing like, what's your productivity like? What new ideas do you get? And then also like, how does it impact your overall well-being?
Right. Yeah, I would,
Mhm.
I intentional, because we define an art break as an intentional act of creativity. That's our definition of an art break. And we seem to be on this path right now of showing people that an art break isn't necessarily what you might think of when you first hear the word art break. You know, a lot of people in our experience think of mostly drawing has been my experience, but also painting and having that studio space. And I like the intentionality of the break that you're suggesting. So I'm just imagining someone at their desk working on something for a couple of hours, and then intentionally there's a little like ding ding ding, you know how you have like screen breaks or whatever,
Yeah,
so it's like ding 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 art break,
yeah,
and they get up and they take their journal with a pen with them and they go sit outside and they just doodle. Or I mean, I could think of a lot of things, you know.
right.
You walk around the parking lot at your job, and you look for the color green or something for 10 minutes, and then you go back to your desk, and I feel like you would feel like you had been transformed to a whole nother world, and you might be looking at your work in a whole different way. And yeah, like you said, I know that would happen if someone did it with intention, with the intention, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I also think of how if people took art breaks, it would change the whole environment of the may it be an office or you know how the environment would change because you know we're energy and if you're creating your energy changes and so the environment I mean and that's really powerful to have a creative work environment, right? The other thing I was thinking about is if people take art breaks collectively like we do at art break day and we know in the magic what happens is like new think about the collective team ideas and the creativity that you know they would be bouncing off each other. I mean it's amazing, the potential, the limitless potential of you know if you do take an art break in your or you have a station you know in your corporation or your office.
Yeah.
That's what I imagine. I imagine like taking just one desk, just reserving one desk. If you are in a space where it's cubicles and things like that, taking one desk and reserving it for art breaks where, you know, you have your oil pastels, your crayons, your I don't know, your headphones with some classical music or
Hmm.
something. You so many different things, and just for someone to be able to, if they are stuck on something, to go and just
Hmm.
go away from that part of their head for a little bit. Or if they just need to do some, it's like everybody needs to get up from their desk and
Hmm.
walk around for a little bit. So walk around to the art break station and just kind of swish around for a while and then go back. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I'm doing this.
yeah. I think the key is, I think, you know, you've hit on so many like really important points
Hmm.
in just these few minutes. I think the key is intentionality, because when we don't have a container of purpose,
Yeah.
we really can't access the state of flow, which is what puts us into mindfulness, what begets productivity. And so intentionality also butts up against this concept of like, I'm not an artist,
Mm.
I don't know how to draw, you know, it would be better if I just sort of scrolled through Instagram or something and looked at art, or you know, or did something that I am more comfortable doing. You know, I think we all would be salivating over an art table, though, you know, the people who might really benefit from taking an art break might feel quite reticent towards it, because art is such a vulnerable experience for so many people because of whatever stories they have around their own creativity, around their own artistic voice and history. And so I think creating a container of intentionality where there is some sort of facilitation, whether it's more of like a passive table with like follow these instructions, or
Mhm.
you know, what I'm a proponent of is having a facilitator come in much like you would have a yoga instructor come in or some sort of team building, facilitator come in to really build the container. Because I think the part about creativity and the workplace that is so charged is it's vulnerable.
Right.
And if creativity or a creative practice isn't done with intentionality, with clear boundaries, with a clear safe container. I mean, I hate saying safe space because I feel like it's like, I don't know, it's just like such a nuance. There's so many connotations to that word now, but creating a space that has intentional methodology with a purpose and a flow to it, can really create opportunities for people to be creative within the workspace without feeling like they're going to therapy, right? Because like we want to create the conditions for creativity in the workplace, but we also want to respect the boundaries of personal and professional. And like, how do you do all of that, in the space of the workplace?
I think, so I have two things. I really agree with having someone who has the ability and sort of the knowledge, the experience and everything of understanding that not everybody's like gung-ho about making art coming in. I've had that experience before where I've had offices ask me to come in and just have everyone take an art break. And this was a recycling center. So we did an upcycling project. And had like this woman gave me the like worst glare I've ever received, hands down, my entire life.
Aww.
Like it was a waste of time, and she was there because she was required to be there for work.
Wow.
By the end of the 2-hour workshop, she had completely transformed.
Wow.
And she kind of reluctantly walked up to me to show me her work after all her coworkers saw it and were like, they were aghast because it was spectacular, and so if she had an art making desk at her job, she'd probably never sit down at it, right?
Right.
The touchiness of the subject that we're talking about. And the second touchy thing you just said was the personal and the professional.
Yeah.
And leads to the second question I have that when you ask the question, how can art play a positive role in the workday, right? You answer it. We all know the answer here, but it's why. If it plays, well, why isn't it part of the everyday workday? And I think you've touched on it. It's because it becomes a very personal thing. If it's intentional, you open up so much. So how do you balance those things?
Yeah, right. I mean, what a wonderful question, right? How do you balance those things? Because art, Eisner says art picks up where words leave off. Like we can see through art so much beyond what we can articulate through words. And that can be a really astounding, awakening, aha experience for us. Like I've had experiences where I've created art where I've just gotten into this flow and something is, this just like came out of me one time and I was like, huh, and I've grown up in the creative practice and process. And so, I feel comfortable in that sort of unknown space. And I found myself in talking with corporations being like, oh, it's really fun because everybody gets together and it's like, oh, I didn't know that Jerry from accounting had this vision or this voice or this way of creating. And then I took a pause and realized, well, wait, maybe Jerry from accounting doesn't want people to know that, right? Like maybe that isn't actually a selling point to some workspaces and places and to some people in different ways, because that could be a very vulnerable experience. I think it's like, how can we see each other at work? How can we find our authentic voice at work? as a positive thing, but it is entirely possible that for some people that is a real boundary push. So how to create space for intentional creativity, for people to really build confidence in their creative process, to see their authentic voice, because we know that authentic voice gets put into the shadows,
Right.
and in this protective place as we get older and have to conform to society's constructs. So how do we create that balance between, and it doesn't need to be an either or, but how do we create space for practicing creativity while also creating space for people to find their own limits of their comfort in that process?
Yeah.
And I think not to toot our horns, but really toot our horns and to say that's what makes us important and unique in this space.
Mhm.
I don't think that this can just be some sort of like, oh, we're going to show up and make some art and to expect the same results as an experienced facilitator coming in with a purposeful methodology that says, like, I know how to create space. Like, Lauren, you were talking about the woman at the recycling center. I'm sure you held space for her in her process,
Right.
and knew when to engage and when to give her space and how to talk about the art, as opposed to it being like, this is good or this is not good, or this is right or wrong. I don't think I answered your question, but
No, it's okay. I got it. For what came up for me was a couple of things. The first is, yes, you do need like somebody to hold space for people, and so you have to be a cheerleader, you have to be a coach as well, and you have to be able to hold space for people. I think that's key, because I know if you just have a table full of art supplies, you're not going to get to the people who really need it, or who could really use it. Right. The other question I have, or other thought that I have, is like, when we do create art, and Lauren and I talk about this all the time, you're kind of showing your real self, right? Your authentic self. And I think a lot of people are afraid that people will judge them, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Especially if you have fear of art, or you have had a wounded art, and then, you're going to create something. I mean, I can imagine one person be like, what are they going to think of me? You know what I mean? And so how do you create a boundary or safe space that it's okay? And it's hard though. I mean, because I think you said personal and professional. Do offices want to go to the personal? Do you know what I mean? That's what came up for me through that.
Yeah, and I guess I would argue that I think they should. That would be right. Whether or not, and maybe that's the answer. Maybe the answer is that their answer right now is no, and they need someone to talk to them about why it should be a yes.
Right.
And I think the reason, so I would argue that if you want to put out a table full of art supplies and paper in your office, please do it. There'll be people that use it. But if you want like an all-encompassing type of deal, yes, you should get someone who has more experience in the people who say the things like, I can't draw, this is a waste of time, all that kind of stuff that you're going to get when you introduce the idea of an art break to them. And I think that the reason it should be a yes is for all the things we've just been talking about, for the things we talk about all the time, which is basically that art makes you a better person.
Yeah.
People make a better workforce, make a better world. And the way that art makes people better is that, I mean, you just gave two great examples of the research of it reduces stress. I mean, and it increases productivity. Those are like two huge selling points for a work environment. And then the third would be team building skills. There's no way that if you get to the point where you can make art together as an office, there's no way you're not going to feel more connected to the people you're making art with. I mean, we witness within an hour-long period people who've never met each other, who wouldn't even talk to each other, like handing their phone numbers to each other by the end of a hour-long art break conversation.
Mhm.
Find that connection. They realize that we're all in this same thing together,
Mm,
and we actually have the same goals. We might just have different ways of getting there.
right.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the World Economic Forum, Udemy have all published within this last year that creativity is in the top 3 skill sets needed, not only today, but for the future of the workforce. But the question is, well, how do you promote creativity? What actually is creativity?
Right.
Creativity is taking a risk and experimenting,
Mhm.
imagining something new, being curious, engaging in a process that is, messy, and communicating in different modalities and in different ways, thinking differently, and so we say that creativity is valuable and
Right.
valued, and it's what's building the next products, right?
Right.
It's not only moving businesses forward into the great unknown and the beyond, um, but it's also something that helps us in our well-being and who we are, and it's what differentiates us from AI, right? Like, so
Right.
not only does it help businesses innovate and move forward in a competitive market, but it also helps the individual differentiate themselves from a machine. It's what
Right.
makes us not a machine. But how do we create the space to do that, right? Like, we can say we value creativity, but if we're not creating the culture for creativity within the workforce, how do we actually think it's going to happen? There's only so many, like, trust falls and ping pong competition
Yeah.
and drunken bowling, team building that you can do. I mean, it doesn't have to be drunken, but I just have this
Right.
of it being drunken.
Yeah.
And I really think it has to do with leadership. I think, having an art table is huge. It would be
Yeah.
amazing if there was an art table at work. But if nobody saw their boss sit down and make art,
Right.
would they have the permission to sit down and make art? I think,
Mm.
it
Mhm.
culture comes from the top. It really
Yeah.
does. And we need to see leaders sitting down and taking an art break. We need to see leaders showing how we can have intentional boundaries at work. We're not showing up for therapy,
Mhm.
but we are finding a way to be vulnerable in a space of sharing an idea that might flop. Going beyond, thinking way outside of the box. And how can we practice that? We can practice those behaviors, those conditions for building a creative culture through art making. It's like a test kitchen that is transferable. So, the question is, if creativity is valuable at work for not only businesses to move forward, but also for people to stay competitive in the workforce, like, how is that actually happening? And how can you practice that in a low stakes way that's not like this product that you're developing for your client, but
Right.
have the transferable skills?
That's great. Yeah, I think what we're talking about, it would be a game changer. What I'm thinking is the creativity is kind of like a buzzword right now,
Mhm.
and I don't know if they're really walking the talk. If they
Mhm.
were, they would have art facilitators in every office
Yeah.
in the country. So I think it's like, I think we're almost there because they're using the language, but it's not walking the talk. So and what I don't understand, I mean, because we're artists, but why aren't they embracing this? Why aren't they thinking of this? And why would they be rejecting this concept? That's what I think.
Yeah, I think that, well, it's interesting that you say that they want creativity, but they don't understand that you can you can train creativity. So
Right.
you can someone
Mhm.
who is quote unquote not creative, which I would argue that's BS, but someone who is denying their own creativity. That's
There
better.
you go. A
That's a
denier.
you could take a creativity denier, you could take a creativity denier, and you could make them creative
Mhm.
through what we were talking about. And so
Oh, yeah.
step they're not taking. They want you to come in with all the stuff that we're talking about. And I would argue that they may not even be talking about the same thing, because I think they're thinking in term they're not even aware that an art break would instigate creativity. They haven't
Mm.
yet. So someone needs to tell them that,
Yeah.
or send that message to them that you can actually create a more creative workforce through the act of taking art breaks on a regular basis. I guarantee you, if that started happening and an office took, like, their productivity levels and their, like, morale, right?
Yeah.
Two great to measure in a workspace. And they started implementing regular art breaks, they would see an uptick in both morale and productivity, hands down. Give it 6 months,
Yeah.
it would go.
I think it's huge. I think that we've been trained with a fixed mindset around art, right? Like it's a talent. It's
Right.
something that's
Oh,
been
yes.
gifted to you,
Oh, man.
right?
Yeah.
Like either you're good at it or you're not, or you're sort of good at it. And it's my mission and yours as well to help people see that creativity is a muscle.
Yeah.
And the more it's like going to the gym, the more we use it, the more confidence we have in it, the more we're willing to explore it and try different things, the more growth mindset we have around it. And I also think that we're trained on like this is good art, this is
Mhm.
bad art, this is the right way, this is the wrong way, and it's all of this social construction that gets in the way of us really exercising our muscle, because we sort of cut ourselves off before we even move forward.
Mhm.
um but I also think that it takes leaders who are willing to take a risk. Like I said before, it comes from the top down, and creativity and the creative practice is a growth mindset. It's messy, and it's not something that we can always tie down to metrics. It's
Right.
it's a soft science in so many ways, where I've had people sit down at the Creative Flow art making table, make art, stand up, be like, I feel better, and
Yeah.
then they go on their way, and then I'll hear from them a week later, and they'll be like, oh my goodness, Shannon, I got this out and then I tried
Mhm.
that and I haven't, and it's like, it can be hard to measure. And because it's hard to measure in sort of the, corporate constructed way, it can be really risky to bring on and feel like you can justify. And so, it takes a boundary pushing, early adopting leader to see this. And I think one of the ways that they can see it is that it's one of those things that you just have to experience. You just
Yeah.
have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
mean,
that's definitely what we've noticed.
yeah, but it's in a way, if you think about it, it could be very low risk in terms of a monetary. You could art supplies aren't that much, you know what I mean? And a facilitator is not going to be like that much, you know? So I mean,
Right.
I think I hate to say this, but I think it's our job if we want to shift this paradigm. You
Mhm.
have to talk to the leaders and you have to give them the juice and you have to say, you can go. I mean, we talk about science all the time on Art is Moving. We know, it's like if you make art, guess what? You're gonna feel better. That's the bottom line. I mean, and then the world's gonna be a better place. So it's like, yeah, it's like how do you? I don't know. I forgot even what I was talking about. So,
Well, I agree, right? Like in the grand scheme of things, it feels like a big risk at first because
yeah,
it's not something safe like, bowling, as I said earlier, or something that people tend to do in a sort of low risk way. But the rewards or the gains
right.
are just as great, if not greater than the risk. And, in terms of budgets, like you said, it's not that we can make art with pencil and a paper.
Right.
We
Right.
don't need fancy materials to,
Mhm.
to generate this practice and to engage this muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, I mean, I completely agree. Let's hope that, we can come back to this conversation in a couple years we'll be talking about it, how amazing it was that this company and this company realized how important creativity in the workplace and actually facilitating creativity in the workspace has become. So,
Yes. Yeah.
unless anybody has any last things they just pop into their head that they want to mention.
Well, the only thing that I want to re-emphasize is just that, vulnerability for the sake of vulnerability isn't necessarily productive. And having intentional vulnerability at work,
Mhm.
around something that's guided like art making can be really powerful. But if it's not done with intentionality, people feel sort of without a container of safety, and then we don't really reap the benefits of it. And so just being really aware of what is the end goal, and knowing that we might not necessarily be able to measure the end goal, or we'll be able to measure it, but it may be beyond what we can measure. And to be really intentional about the methodology of delivering it is, I think, the key to helping this
Well, yeah,
thrive.
I agree with you, and I think it does need a guide, definitely a guide, because you got to educate people. It's all about education, because you can't just show up at the workplace as an artist and go, "Let's make art." You got to really talk about how does it transform, how does it seed ideas, how does it make you more creative, how to thinking out of the box. It's almost like as a guide, as an artist going into these spaces, you reveal like what's gonna the benefit, what benefits will be reaped.
Yes, but
Yeah.
I think it can be achieved with an art table as well. If there
Mhm.
are some signs and some,
Mhm.
intentional guides and instructions, I think that can be done. I think that can be done too. So,
I would argue that's a good place to start. You know what I mean? And just, it's better than nothing.
Right.
mhm,
You
yeah,
think of like an art table or no art table. Then
mhm,
I would table. And then I would vote art table and then facilitator at least on a monthly basis. That's
yeah,
what I think people would see a huge shift. It would see a huge shift in their workspace if they started doing that.
mhm,
Um, that the reason you need a facilitator, well, we already talked about tons of reasons, but you also go in there and you can tell them that, when I say the word art, it means something different. I have a feeling it means something different to me than it does to you, and I'm here to show you that art can basically mean everything and anything.
mhm.
um, it's not, art doesn't have a container, right?
Right.
It's right. So
Right. And I think if I had an art table, I would put up that NASA study that
Mhm.
that Dr. George Land did, where it showed that 98% of 5-year-olds, 4 and 5-year-olds, tested on the highly genius scale rating category of creativity, and how this longitudinal study measured hundreds of kids over five-year increments, and how their creativity measurements or they're reaching the highly creative dropped exponentially. So it's not that we don't have it, it's just that our muscle has atrophied. And so, you know, if we want to be creative, we just need to spend some time with a 4 or 5 year old and follow them. or find,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
find our own inner 4 and 5 year old and engage with that play with that kid. And it's there, it's already there. We don't need to do anything but to just find our own way of tapping into that voice and that muscle.
I love it. Carl J. Schutt just put in the comment box, start art table. So start art table would be the station.
Startable.
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 Carl is a wordsmith. I know.
Wow.
Carl. He is a deep champion of creative flow. Thank
I
you,
love
Carl.
it.
He's
That's
a
awesome.
wordsmith. And that's how his creativity emotes. You know, there's so many ways to be creative, but you know, if Carl didn't risk putting his wordsmithing out there, his coworkers might not know that he has that secret power, you know? And so how can we see each other's secret powers? And,
I always call it a superpower. It's your superpower.
yeah, our secret superpowers, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Carl, and thanks, Shannon. I love this conversation, and I look forward to seeing the world continue to shift towards making art part of every person's life. And obviously, I'm on that mission, so I'll keep going on that. And so are the other two of you. So that's awesome. Together, we can just move forward. Yeah.
We'll do it.
Onward. All right.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait to circle back in a year and talk about how corporations have not only value creativity as a word and as a mission and a vision, but are actually living it in their everyday practice. I'm really looking forward to talking about that.
I love it.
Yes. All right.
Thank
See
you.
We should do it in a year. Thanks.